Hello and welcome to Sweet Omagh Town Internet Radio, and I'm joined as usual with my co-host Declan Ford. Good evening, Mr. Ford.
Good evening, Mr. McGartland.
A fine time of year to be here out on the cold winter's night.
I feel a ho coming on. Oh, it is bitter cold and I am sick at heart.
It is indeed. Anyway, how would you like to go to Italy for a holiday?
Oh, I would love to go to Italy. I want to go to Florence next year. I want to go to the heat. I think Italy is an absolutely wonderful country. Wonderful people, wonderful food, wonderful music, wonderful weather.
But
we're stuck here in County Tyrone. Imagine leaving Italy and coming over to Tyrone. Wouldn't that be a some journey?
Especially during the early 40s, late 40s and possibly early 50s.
Absolutely. A strange time in the world's history.
Some time ago, quite a while ago, we had Mark McGartland here and we done a history of O'Keefe Park.
That's right.
And we talked to a few of the families. And one of them was the McGartland Brothers.
That's right.
And they kind of sort of stayed on, and we talked about growing up in Gortrush Park and then the mother coming from Italy. And that's the subject of tonight's programme.
Yes. And it was great crack.
Isn't it?
It was great crack because we wove in music with it and reminiscence. And it was just three delightful characters to sit with, like three musketeers, one for all and all for one. And I had a lovely evening, just blathering.
It was good. It was real good. It was. And this is the subject of tonight's programme, and I hope you enjoy it. The only thing I would like to say to the listeners is that because we are on Facebook, okay, and we're on YouTube as well, but most of our listeners are on YouTube or on Facebook. Facebook don't like us, Mr. Ford.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, I can understand why they wouldn't like you, but what did I do to them?
You're included in it as well. The fact is we do not give them any advertising. We have, according to them, we have more than enough listeners to subsidise our programmes with advertising, which I don't like advertising because I think it interrupts the programme and it spoils the whole ethos of the whole thing. It's all voluntary anyway.
Yes.
So I refuse all ads, and then because of that, they don't let us on their platform. So I'll respectively ask our listeners if they would mind to either like what we do and share it at least with one or two people.
Right.
That gets it out and about, that gets the algorithms up, and then it'll rise in its own level.
Good.
Either that or we buy ads, and so that's...
Well, no one knew that the thought of actually putting money or putting your hand in the pocket and taking out that wallet that has...
Oh my God.
Has cobwebs on it.
What? I tell you, my son says when I take a £20 note or £10 in my wallet, Queen blinks.
Absolutely. As the little flies fly out.
Seriously, but anyway, thanks for listening to it. I hope you enjoy it. And it's a good programme. It's all about their lifestyle, their times, and their Omagh people, and it's all about Omagh anyway. Our programmes have changed a bit because mostly our programmes were to do with the history of the town. This is still part of the history of the town, but it's not the history maybe as long back as people would like to think history is. But they've lived through the changing times, and them all came here during the war.
Yeah, and it's important because it's do you know what? To be highfalutin about it, it is a social history.
Absolutely.
Of how the town has changed and developed and evolved, and every generation has the stories to tell.
They really do. You really do.
So I think it's wonderful to branch out into interviewing families,
well,
and then you get the different generations.
The listeners we have, where there are quite a few from Omagh, there are quite a few who wouldn't know where Omagh is on a map, because they just listen. And one listener said to me, she says, it's like listening to someone else's phone call. You know, they come in and they're eavesdropping on the conversation. It's just lovely. And another guy who was taken by the people who were involved in the war during here and the soldiers and various things like that, because they were historians and they were talking about the American soldiers coming over here during the war. They hadn't heard the side of the story that they heard here. So you don't know where these voices are going to or where they finish up.
Yeah, well, ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to Eavesdrop Radio.
Absolutely. Here, talk to you soon.
This is Ilario Geraldino McGartlands, otherwise known as Dino.
Piero Alberto McGartland, otherwise known as Peewee.
And Anthony Giuseppe Carlo, known as Tony.
Sounds like somebody of the mafia. You're welcome, very welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, before that, let's talk about your very earliest memories. We were neighbours in Gortrush Park on the day, you know.
Yeah.
That's right. I can remember a good bit about playing football on the square there, you know, and making up games and playing football on the green and making go-karts and who the neighbours there, the likes of yourself and Seamus and Ronnie Chisholm, the McCanses,
McCulloughs,
the McCulloughs,
McGartlands,
Chisholm.
That's right.
So
Doherty's.
we were just in that wee square, you know,
Yeah.
like, and it's funny, not long ago, I was back down in it and I couldn't believe how small it was.
You know,
Who we ever played 10 aside down there, that sort of beats me, like, you know, but
Yeah.
it was, then we moved to the green where you used your pullover as goalpost, you know, like. But we used to love it whenever the council used to come round to cut the grass on the green. We used to gather up all the grass and make fences out of it, like the Grand National.
Yeah.
So the grass could have been about maybe 3 or 4 foot high.
Yeah.
And we
Beaches.
the whole length of
Yes.
the green down Gortrush was like our Grand National, like,
That's right. Aye.
stuff like that was great.
Magic, wasn't it? You think back on it. Aye.
You were very inventive.
Playground there, there was like a playground.
You were inventive in those days, making go-karts out of pieces of wood and
Uh-huh.
pram wheels, things like that. You know, I'm sure everybody's done that.
Yeah. In our backyard, we had a fence next to where the concrete ended and the garden began, you know. And I used to throw a doormat over the top of the fence, and that was my horse, you know, and saddle. And I used to come running out of the back door, and my trick was to try and throw a leg over this imaginary horse and gallop off into the sunset.
Beating the backside of yourself. Just,
But
Indeed.
but one
But it
year-
was the same mat. It brought back memories of my father used to go out into the garden to dig and to turn the soil and that, and like I would have been inside hiding away from the cold, and he would say, you know, the famous line, "Get away out there and blow a stink of yourself," you know. But sometimes the mat on the back door doubled up as a sort of a shawl to keep me warm in the garden, you know.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that there about beating the backside of yourself when you were playing cowboys and Indians. But I remember one Christmas everybody was getting cowboy outfits, you know, and Indian, you know, the big
Chuck
Indian,
Connor's rifle sets.
Indian headdresses, you know, and the rifleman outfit and all.
Yeah.
What did we get? We got James Bond briefcases. So
The man from Uncle.
was it the man from the man
Was
from
the man
Uncle?
from
We had
Uncle.
two.
Yeah, Curiac.
We had the man from Uncle briefcases, you see, and then you opened them up and there was a secret compartment where there was a hidden gun, and then you pressed another button and then there was a dagger on it, but you got this sort of a badge to go with it to say that you're a man
Secret
from Uncle.
agent.
Secret agent, you know. So it looked really funny. The rest of our friends were
Galloping
being
around.
John Wayne, galloping and beating the sides of themselves, and here was us coming with the two man from
Briefcases.
Uncle briefcases behind them, you know.
And the invisible ink inside it.
That's right. You could write something and nobody could see it, only us. Like, you know.
Even the trains were still going at that. Well, the Great
That's
Northern
right,
Road
yeah.
was out the back garden.
Yeah, back garden, down the
Just
flats.
remember
Yeah.
the steam.
Yeah.
Aye,
That would come from Derry, maybe.
Aye, that area we called it the plot.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Between the
Yeah.
back of our
Yeah,
house
that's right,
and the,
we were-
but you could see you could hear the train coming from
Full of
Nessus.
nettles.
You would see the puff of smoke coming, and then you'd all run around the back. You could actually see the people on the train. Like,
Oh, you
basically,
could,
you could
sure.
actually, we were actually waving at them, you know.
It was back in the days when dogs had Christian names, you know.
Yes, exactly.
They used the Dohertys had a dog called Pint. And he ran about with a. When you felt his ear, you could feel a hard knobble in it, you know. And we discovered that it was one of the Chisholms that hit it with a pellet gun, and it survived, you know.
Aye, but that's true about the dog. There was Pint Doherty and there was
Aye,
Paul
the
McGrath.
dogs had names.
Aye,
Smokey McGrath, the dog.
Rory,
Collins is next door.
Rory,
Yeah.
Mrs. What do you call the wee woman in the corner?
Molly Rogers.
Molly Rogers
Yes.
had a dog called Rory, you know.
Right, right.
No, every
And
time.
Collins has had a dog next to us. They had Teddy and Sheila, two wee
Oh,
wee
right.
Westies. No, and just they were the dogs.
Yeah.
You know.
No, then there was Rex up at the Alsatian.
Yeah. But Gortrush was there was something special about it because it was tiny, and all the front doors were open. You know, I can remember once upon a time, my mother, you know, we got up to get breakfast, whatever, and the kettle was missing. And it was missing for days, and we discovered that Mrs. McElhinney next door had borrowed it, but didn't bother to tell us, you know.
As you do.
And you know, you'd have come in there and you'd have bought a loaf of bread, and dinner time would be half of it would be gone, you know. Somebody else would be in, you know, everybody helping themselves.
Oh yeah. Did Mrs. Grimley, the Grimleys live in Gortrush?
Down the bottom, Declan, yeah, that's right.
I think so.
I don't know.
Monaghan's there.
Aye,
There was Monaghan's, yeah.
Dominic and Dennis.
Dennis Monaghan.
They were down at the very
Catherine
end.
Monaghan, was there a Catherine? I was there to a lady in the town, and she remembers the McGartlands, but she was but she lived on further on down where Mackin Hills and all that, on down that way, you know.
Yes,
but
yes,
she was Catherine, you know. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't venture down to that bottom end of the park. It was too far away.
That's right.
I mean, mother was a nervous wreck, you know. If she looked out the window and couldn't see you, you know, it was time to get help,
She
you
was
know.
the biggest
That's right.
warrior ever, you know.
That's that right.
Oh
That's right.
yeah.
Aye,
Biggest warrior.
She used to knock the court. We'd be out kicking football in the square, and the next thing the one would get the rattle, you know, white finger. We'd go,
that's it.
what's wrong? Get down there on the floor now. The Pope's giving the blessing
Oh,
on TV.
the
The three of us, live from the Vatican, the three of us kneeled down in front of the TV, like,
sniggered.
and we were going, what's going
I mean,
on here?
Slaps from the back.
Behave
you know.
yourself. And then we'd go out then to finish off the game of football, and the rest of them were saying, where were you, or what were we doing? We daren't say we were kneeling down in front of the TV, you know, getting the blessing, you know. But there was a lot of music down there. I always remember the music side of things, because you were musical. Then you had Frank Chisholm next door.
That's right.
Frankie McBride lived on ahead
That's
down there.
right. That's right.
And then
that's
you
right.
had
McCullough's, the corner.
That's
All the
right,
traditional.
that's right.
Aye. But always
Jackie Adams there.
Jackie Adams. We used to stand outside his front door. You'd
That's
hear him
right.
drumming on a
That's
Sunday
right.
afternoon. You know?
practice.
But there's one really good memory is we were kicking football in the green one afternoon. We seen this boy walking up from Hunter's Crescent towards the shop. We were going, look at him, look at that boy there. That was Rob Strong.
Yeah.
And he looked, you know, at that time his hair wasn't long, but it was shoulder length, and he had these glasses, and he was wearing a buckskin jacket. We used to stop the game of football just to watch him because he was so different, you know. You know. But I remember seeing the tall men bandwagon coming in to pick up. I think Hugo Duncan might have been with them at the time. But I'd sit on the tall men wagon, you know, TALL, but the two L's, they had a big pair of hobnail boots at the end of each L, you know, and that always stuck out in my head, you know. You know.
As we lived in Uri, and the Hilton Show Band was the band there. Ricky McVeigh, I think, was the bass player. And if we saw Ricky McVeigh, our day was made.
That's
Like
right.
you and Rob Strong.
Yeah.
Ah, there you are, you see.
That's the same with those, maybe with Toe Jam with Jerry Anderson. Like,
That's
you know.
right.
Jerry came to Omagh with the band. And
And then Charlie Fox used to, another musician, he was dating Deborah.
Deborah.
Frank's
Yeah.
wife, God rest her, you know.
Yeah.
But so there was a good music connection down there too, you know.
Tell me about your mother. Then she was obviously Italian, but how did she meet your dad? Do you know anything about that?
Well, she came to Omagh in July 1953, and she arrived at the railway station in Duke Street in Derry there, and the connection with Ireland was that all of those Italians from Derry, Strabane, Letterkenny, Bundoran all came from the same village in Italy, which was called Bassiano, which was a small mountain village of 1,100 people, you know. So the word got around that there was work. So the Iannarellis came first, and the Fiorentinis and all these people, the Derry and so on and so forth. And the Bianconis arrived in Letterkenny, and they had the Mistletoe Cafe there. And in 1953, when my mother arrived, it was during the week that the Queen's coronation was taking place. And all the flags were up across the whole city, you know. And I remember my mother arriving on the train and asking this woman, Iannarelli, what's all these flags about? And they said, they're for you. They heard that this Italian woman was arriving in town today, you know. So she actually got started in the Mistletoe Cafe in Letterkenny. At the time my father was working in England, he was in Derby. Him and Jerry Sharkey went over to work in the building of a power station in Derby, and they were writing letters back and forth, you know. And when she wasn't in Letterkenny, she then would have moved to the Olympia Cafe in Bundoran, or the Café Rex in Omagh. But then some sergeant in Omagh discovered that she had overstayed her visa, so they were forever raiding the Café Rex.
there was a bounty out for her.
So she permanently had a suitcase packed with clothes at the
Right,
back door, and when the police arrived, you know, Julio would put her into the car and take her off to Bundoran, and she'd lie low for a few weeks until such times that it all settled again, you know.
She'd keep skipping from north to south, back and forward.
This went on, you know, for a couple of years, you know, and I remember she wrote home to her mother and she says, "Mummy," she says, "I have to get married." And her mother back in the 1950s misinterpreted that and thought, "Oh, holy God, no, you're not pregnant, are you?" You know. And she says, "No," she says, "if I don't get married, I'm going to be sent back out of the country, you know, again, and I don't want to leave. I want to be here, you know, in Ireland."
Yeah.
So that's...
Was English your first language, or
Sorry?
was English? Could you speak English when you came here?
Oh, no, she couldn't.
Not a
She'd
word.
not a word,
I mean,
nothing. She had nothing.
I think, you know, when I think back to our childhood, like, we've no, at least I don't have any recollections of ever reading bedtime stories because she couldn't read. She was forever writing letters and trying to translate letters and learn Italian.
Yeah.
When we were children, I remember she told me that she sent me over to an aunt's house to stay for the day because she was in labour and the nurse was arriving. And I came back and says to her, and I'd imagine an Italian says to her, "Don't be sending me back over there again because I don't know what that woman's talking about." So we must have been speaking Italian as infants, you know, because she couldn't speak English. And that's probably why that when we go to Italy we find it easy to pick the language up again, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, she could swear in Italian. Like. Whenever we did something bad, like she just let loose in Italian, like, and it was whatever word she was saying. And we found out later that she was using Italian swear words.
Oh yeah.
But we did discover, remember, you were inquiring about Mum was Dad were writing letters to each other, you know, love letters, that's all they were,
Yeah.
you know. And like I discovered them up in the other home house up in Culmore Park when we moved out later years, but just clearing out stuff because they had both had gone into a nursing home, and I seen this little cream vanity case, never knew nothing of it, just opened it up and it was full. I think there was nearly 90 letters, the wee small envelopes,
Oh yeah.
all handwritten.
He was writing 3 letters a week from his digs in Derby because there was nothing else to do, you know.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing about it was, well, it wasn't amazing. He had nothing to say, you know. And it was to see him, you know, "Well, how are you? I miss you. I love you. I wish I was with you on the Crevenor Road or out in the Lovers Retreat, you know, holding hands." And
Wasn't it Tom Batista who made sure that she had to be chaperoned whenever she
Oh,
first
yeah.
started out with Dad, you know? Tom
whenever
was fairly
my
strict.
father was playing in St Eugene's band, you see, at the time, and they were marching, of course, up and down the high street, and my mother would be out at the shop watching from McManus's corner there or whatever, you know. And she seen my dad and she says, "Oh, that red-headed man, I fancy him," you know. So after the band had finished playing, he and all his mates came into the cafe for fish and chips, and because she couldn't speak English, he slipped a wee note there, you see, and she brought the note to the attention of Tom Batista and says, "Tom, does this man want fish and chips?" And he says, "No, he doesn't want fish and chips, he wants to take you out." So she had to get permission from old Tom Batista to start dating and going out on walks and that, you know.
It wasn't until later on in years that she, with her work on the Café Rex, I remember being a toddler in it, like, you know, basically I grew up in it, like, but they had a brilliant jukebox, and that used to be seemed to be the focal point
The
for a
place
lot
to
of people
be.
about the town, you know. But I used to love, there was a man used to come in maybe once a month to change the records, and I'd be standing there maybe as 4 or 5 years of age watching the records going like this here, and then he would take the cash box out and then he would stock it up again, you know. But I was always drawn to that. But it was in later years we found out she had a wee autograph book.
Oh yeah,
You might know more about it than I do, but
I've seen it
Different.
many times, you know.
aye, but it's still
Don't know
about.
where it went.
No, we don't wear it. But she didn't. Some of these local celebrities, well, not local celebrities, people who would have appeared in the Royal Arms, the girls in the shop would say to my mother, "Go over and get him." They'd more to come in for fish and chips into the Café Rex, you know. So the girls in the shop would say to her, "Come on over and ask him or her
She
for
had
their
Jim
autograph."
Reeves.
She had
and
no
Tom
clue who they
Jones,
were. Randy
Engleton,
Monaghan.
Hummertyke.
Randy Monaghan, but the best one I heard was Ruby Murray was on TV one time years later, and she says, that woman there wore my wedding dress and
That's
tried it
right.
on.
What happened
She
was
came
she
in-
went to Bundoran to buy she went to Sligo when she was living in Bundoran. went to Sligo, bought a wedding dress, and whenever she was coming back, Ruby Murray was in the hotel next door, and they got talking, and Ruby Murray says, "Can I try on your wedding dress?"
Yeah, so that was her claim to fame. Like Ruby Murray's had on my wedding dress.
See, we actually, because when we left Gortrush, we were in between transitioning going to Culmore, but because Culmore wasn't ready, the houses weren't being built, so there was living quarters above the Café Rex. So we were up there. I don't know,
for a year, I think it was.
It was like living in the Buckingham Palace. Those rooms
everywhere.
Whenever the Batistas left on a Sunday, we had the place to ourselves.
John McNally was down the back with a chip peeler, cutting the chips with his machine. Like I was down helping him. We all sort of worked in washing dishes.
Julio had a parlour down the back where he made the ice cream, as well. Like,
good memories of the Café Rex, like, the old seat, the old leather seats, but they moved. So come Sunday when we were cleaning up. Down the back of the seats there was coins. You see everybody.
Everybody's loose change when rolling down the back of the seat.
We got it.
The seat just pulled the seat out. Got an Alsatian dog with Tina was one of the dogs was called Tina, the black Alsatian. So if you walk past the Café Rex window when it was closed, this dog just came in. But
it was the best insurance policy that would have had.
We used to take it out for walks, like, but in round St. Pat's Park there, and the next thing you get loose.
Yeah.
But going back to the Gortrush thing, I do remember my mother, she used to make pasta and pizzas and all that kind of stuff. When we didn't realise at the time, we'd go out to kick football and would have a slice of pizza in our hand. And the rest of the boys were going, "What are you eating?" We says, "Pizza." He says, "What's pizza?" But we assumed everybody ate pizza, but we didn't realise that we were different, and then she'd start making pasta for the neighbours as well, like, I remember chatting to Barry McCullough lately, like, and he was talking about his mum and our mum, and they were very, very friendly and they got on well together. And he says, "I used to love coming over to your house." He says, "The smell of cooking and pizza and stuff and pasta and spaghetti," he says, "was just he says, I can still smell it today, like,
The kitchen in our house was cleared out of all the plates.
The scullery.
She would make a sort of a pizza or an apple tart for somebody and send it over in a plate, and the plate would never come back. And before you knew it, our whole cupboards were empty, the plates. So then, whenever she replaced them all, she usually got a black permanent marker and put her name on all the plates, and make sure they would come back, sooner or later.
But everybody did borrow things from everybody else. Knows that it might have been an iron or an ironing board or something,
I remember we had a huge accident in the kitchen because we had this huge big dresser with plates up above with like glasses and but this the front door folded down. You can lean on it, you see, and have your dinner. So this one day I got maybe this chair. I got up, I was looking for something higher up, and I leaned on the lid, and the whole thing just came on top of me.
The whole glass cabinet.
My mother was mortified, I got 7 stitches in the old leg here, but the worst thing ever happened that time for her, thought it was dead,
There was another incident, one of the big dramas that happened in your childhood is one of the neighbours came in. We had a swing. The fella put up this solid metal swing, concreted into the yard. One of the neighbours' children were on the swing and fell and had her head off to the hospital, And everybody was, before the day was out, everybody was running around shouting, "Pauline's getting a new brain."
Oh yeah.
Good.
Well, what about Christmas dinner? Was it an Italian feast or was it a traditional Irish?
It wasn't really Italian.
No,
it was the same as everybody else.
My mother, although she was Italian, she was quite happy to learn, the style of cooking that was P, And my father, I think, would have probably guided her and said, "Look, there's spuds, you peel them and mash them, and there's a turkey fired in the oven, But she would have put the turkey in the oven, she would have put garlic in along with it, and herbs and all sorts of rosemary and whatnot, and it would have been a hell of a lot more flavoursome than some of the turkeys you would have got in any other household about town,
But she used to find it difficult to get a lot of the spices and herbs and stuff, but she got them from your guy Dobbins. She used to go in there to Dobbins's and he would have big jars full of, and sometimes she'd go and ask for a specific herb or rosemary or whatever, and he would get it for her, and then she'd come back.
She would have grown a fair bit of stuff down the back too, because her upbringing at home was very much a farming, peasant background, and she had they lived in a wee sort of a wooden cabin after the war, and it would have been fields of, you know, plenty of veg and whatnot, you know. So
But she always
she
spoke
was
about
pretty
that, didn't she?
resourceful, you know. She wouldn't.
But you see, whenever we were younger going over to Italy, we didn't realise how spoilt could be the right word. We didn't know we were getting the best of everything, and these people were country people, you know, and they lived up in the mountains, and they still used horses to carry
That's
sticks
it,
and
yeah.
things, you know. And then you would see people carrying huge big cauldrons of water up in there.
Yeah.
They would make a wee
Yeah,
bun out of a tea towel.
Baskets with sticks.
It might take two men to lift it up, and then
Yeah,
once
I
they
mean,
got their
it's-
balance, away they went. Like, you know, and we would see all this, and then we would get our aunt. My mother was the eldest of 8, so like you'd be invited to somebody's house nearly every other day or whatever, and you were getting the real, as you see on TV there now with Dino there, him talking to the nonnas. We were living that, but we didn't
Oh, yeah.
appreciate it at the time, you know.
But you never do. You see, when you're a child, do you?
No.
You never realise just a
Like
gift
we'd have
that
been
was.
away. We'd have been away to Italy as soon as the summer holidays
In
kicked
the
in,
June.
and we weren't back until the holidays ended.
What was the journey?
Oh,
You left
that was
over.
a nightmare.
3 days on the road.
It was a nightmare. How nowadays you can jump on a plane, you're there in 3 hours, but how my mother and father organised the whole transportation to get there, because
Well,
you had to go to Watterson's,
Aye, Watterson travel. You they done it all.
and you had to plan it all
It
out.
was
like.
from Omagh to Larne back then. Larne, Stranraer ferry. Stranraer all the way down to London by train, and then swapped over at the
And
train to another train to go to Dover.
Uh-huh.
Then another ferry over to Calais, North France. Then like an 18-hour journey all the way
Right
down
down,
through the Alps to
you know.
Rome. Then from Rome to the nearest city to Bassiano would be Latina. There's a train station there, and then from Latina you'd probably get the bus or
Or
the
a lift.
relatives come in cars. It was like it was a trek. It was 2.5.
So if the train was late, or the bus pulled in late, the whole thing
I
was.
used to be as sick as a dog on the boat.
Oh, I know we were just you were
No,
just
and-
eating chocolate and never by naive and then like you know.
And
Beds.
we used to, my mother used to have them travellers' checks. You know, there was no such things as Visa cards or nothing. So she'd be tearing off travellers' checks and going to the bank, cashing them in for lira, which was the currency then, you know, and
But how they organised all that, and then
unbelievable.
my father would have took the main load of having to carry the suitcases.
Like
Because we were all
like the
travelers,
railway
like,
children.
11
all-
suitcases.
That's what it was
you know,
like.
how he managed that, we don't know, like, and to get all the timings right.
You couldn't make it
You
up,
know,
could
that
you?
was-
You couldn't do it today.
No,
Yeah.
but it was unreal. Like looking back,
I'd
on it,
love to
right?
take that trip nowadays, just
Just to see what it was like.
you
Yeah.
know. But amazing things.
The train journey down through France into Italy was, you know, as I say, we were sick most of the time. Like, but as you say, it'd be worthwhile trying to
Reminiscing, let's go there.
Indeed.
But there's people still say to us, and were you born in it? No, this thing. How long are you living here now? You know, we get that quite a lot. Like,
Yeah.
you know, how long are you over here? When did you move over?
I remember standing at the bus station in the village in Bassiano during one of the holidays, and must have been talking to one of my brothers or sisters, and this fella came over to me and he says, "Hey, where are you from, young fella?" And I instantly recognised this Tyrone accent. And I said, "I'm from Omagh." And he says, "I'm from Strabane," he says. And it was a friend of my mother's, Dan Cassoni, and he had been sort of travelling between Strabane and Bassiano, and a bit like ourselves, you know, he had the Italian connection and he was moving back and forth, you know. But it was fascinating hearing this Tyrone
But,
accent.
have you have a good story about Dr. McMullen's family coming over? Can you remember?
Oh yeah.
No, that's right. I was in the village one day, and we used to sit about the bar. There used to be seats outside, and like, you know, the tradition in Italy is that age and alcohol, it didn't matter. You know, so you could have sat with your uncle and had a wee beaker of beer or whatever. You know. But I noticed this sort of a camper van pulling in, and of course the whole village surrounded it. You know, to see who these people were, and the number plate looked a bit familiar. It was like a BJI number plate or something on it. So they started waving me, "Come over, speak English, you know, and I headed over and I said, "Hello, can I help you?" He says, "We're looking for the McGartland family." And I says, "You're speaking to one of them?" "Oh, we're the McMullens from Omagh, you know." And I says, "Come on ahead." So we ended up having a big spread and a banquet that evening with him, you know. So they
Dr.
were-
McMullen.
they stayed at for a number of days, you know, they were touring around, you
Well,
know.
they did. What I recall was where my mum's parents, Albertina and Ilario, that was their names. But they just live in a wee small terrace house, one room downstairs, kitchen, dinette, the whole thing, and then was there one bedroom upstairs?
One
Just
upstairs.
one up and one
But I
down.
remember the front door was lying open summer, hot
Oh,
weather.
yeah.
We were just sitting there, and in the cobble streets you could hear the.
Clippity clap, like. Aye.
Horses
And
and
that's what I
ponies going up
remember,
and
you
down.
know. You could hear about maybe there's a lot of people coming up the street, and they walked past, and it was the McMullins. That's what I remember, you
Oh,
know.
right,
You
okay.
know, but when you might have met them in Port and Off,
Oh,
maybe in
yeah.
the square, you know. But we would just stop and just start, and even McMullen is my GP now, but we
You
all
still remember them?
members, you
Uh-huh.
know.
It's not
You
incredible,
know,
isn't it?
people from Omagh and a village you would never visit, you know. It's just a mountain village in the middle of nowhere up in the.
But years later, I had to go to do a first aid course in the Grange. Of course, we were there for 5 days. At the end of the 5 days, you had to go in, and there was 2 doors, this door and this door, 2 doctors. I found out Dr. McMullen was the one on the right. I says, right, I'll go in here. It was like an exam type of thing, you know. I walked in. I says, right, McMullen's going to be in here. I walked in and he was sitting behind the desk, glasses on, but he didn't even look up whenever I walked in, and he was just writing away and writing away. Right, okay, what's the name? He didn't look up. I went, Dino McGartland. Straight away he looked up. Are you anything to Fiorenza? I said, I asked my mother. Well, wait till I tell you about the time. And I started reciting the story about what we were just after hearing. At the end of the whole thing, I was in for about 20 minutes. Whenever I went out, he says, you're dead on, he says, you know, give me a thumbs up. But whenever I went outside, the boys were outside, they were waiting to go on. He says, well, you were in for 20 minutes. I says, I tell you what, he gave me some grilling, and they were,
Unreal.
no, but it was,
It was a wee bit different growing up in Omagh with an Italian mother. She probably was the only Italian woman in the town maybe at that time. So it was a bit special, like, you know, and you were getting treated to, as you say, traditional food. But we just got, we did get a lot of pasta. Mum made her own pizzas as well, and she made lasagnas. And we used to have the old, coming back from school, and remember she had this old coffee machine where you had
That's right.
the beans in, and we all
Grinder.
took turns.
Grinder.
But your palms of your hands were like blistered.
Yeah.
And just to bring it into the powder, you know. And then, but she made lasagnas for everybody, and then put the tin foil and then black marker
she made something that I
She used to send dinners,
everywhere.
lasagnas and stuff up to the parochial house.
Yeah.
That's
You know,
right, uh-huh.
people started to get wise there, you know, the realizations an old softy, you know, and what a sister, oh, I hear you do a lovely lasagna. Do you want me to send you one up? Aye, okay. My father's heart was broke with this woman in the kitchen cooking for half the town, you know.
The guy in McCartland who owned the Pizzarama in Kelsey, you know, he came up to the house many years ago when we were up in Culmore, and he found out Mum made pizzas, you know, and he more or less wanted to know what is your recipe, and she wouldn't tell him. It's a man's secret, you know.
What was the one about you, whenever you were working over in Sperrin Park,
Oh,
and you used to jump the fence?
Oh, I was working in Sperrin Park, and of course my mother spoiled everybody. She used to make me my lunch every day, you know. So I headed to work this day and opened the lunchbox, cheese sandwiches, ate them, and that was it. Next day, cheese sandwiches. I thought, Christ, is there anything else on the menu here? Next day, cheese sandwiches again, and I just couldn't face them. We brought them home, and my mother opened the box. She says, what happened to your lunch today? I says, I wasn't in the humour for eating them today at all, you know, that was okay. So she was making dinner, and she presented me with this plate chips and this stuff on the side. You see, this is what's these wee things with batter on them. She says it's a wee speciality of mine. So I got stuck on my knife and fork and ate them up, you see. And she said, did you not realise what they were? And I said, no, that's the cheese sandwiches that you brought home today.
Waste not, want not.
I remember in Bassiano in the summer, I was probably about 7 or 9, but I went AWOL. I just went for a walk and ended up down at my mum's sister's house, Valeria, and her husband, Neno, big guy. He just eats.
He was like Oliver Reed.
Yeah, you know, so back down at the house, you know, and plate of spaghetti and a beer. I mean, I'm only 7 or 9 years old. That's what you were saying. drink doesn't matter, like, but it's not big quantities. They drink beer out of wee small glasses, like, in the square. But I was away from maybe 2 or 3 hours missing. Search party was out for me, but I'm just getting, my belly's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger with the beer, and I had probably 3 plates of pasta. But they found me eventually, and it's just like the police were near the Carabinieri were nearly going to be called. That where is Piero? He's gone missing. But that was the famous story. Like, glad he got.
You came into the house with red sauce.
But didn't she always speak too about her memories about the war, about about that time, about the Germans coming into the village? She always
You see, the Germans were during the war were there to, I suppose, protect the town or whatever it was, But she talked. I think she overinflated the story. She talked about these lorry loads of troops arriving in the village and all. And my father says the size of that village, he says, it was probably one soldier looking after the whole place.
But she always had a fear of knives for some reason. Watching a movie, and next week the boy knew this
slasher.
Pierre, turn that off. Always, she always had a fear of stabbing, and just maybe she witnessed. Maybe
no, you know what it was? That was because her grandfather, he lost a finger.
He
only
cut the finger off her side,
and she was never like us.
But he always had a pen knife. And he would eat an apple and maybe just peel it with a knife and just put the knife in his mouth too.
He used to carry cheese.
Knife,
He'd be sitting out hard cheese in the corner and this knife paring away at it,
But they only came over once, didn't they? My grandparents.
Gortrush, they came.
Must have been about 1969 or something.
My grandfather, he used to go for walks, into town, and all these shops had these signs up, sale on, sale. And he came home one day from the town. He says to my mother, he says everybody's selling Sally, which is salt in Italian. He thought every shop was selling salt.
And then Franco, we were eating dinner. Franco came over then, remember? Franco, my Uncle Franco. So when he came out of Dublin Airport, landed at the house, we were having dinner, and he was eating chicken. He says to me, what is it? Chicken. Aeroporto, chicken. No. This is chicken, gallini. Yeah, okay.
No, he loved it over here. He was a peasant farmer, but he couldn't get over how green everything was, and he couldn't figure out, whenever we were driving up from the airport, he would see the farmers ploughing the fields, and there'd be a flock of seagulls or crows after it. And he was going, He's not shooting, because over there they were big into their shooting and stuff. They got clay pigeon shooting. Anything that's got a heartbeat, like, they would have took a shot at it,
They needed it to eat.
They would have anything. Anything with fur and feathers, like. But now we've great memories of going over. We're going back over shortly again, hopefully.
Yeah.
And when was the last time you were over? Was it recent?
I think it was 3 years ago I was over.
I'm good 6-7 years now. Yeah. I'm due back.
But it's still the same. It doesn't change. Everything's the same. Like, it doesn't change.
The last time I was here was for your 60th birthday. Remember? So how many years ago was that?
Oh, don't be saying that. There was 18 of us.
There was 18
of us went. That was some weekend.
We all flew on the well, they all flew to Rome. I flew to Naples, and then like you couldn't organise it, but everybody seemed to arrive at their destination at the same time.
Yeah.
No, it was a wonderful childhood you just had when you think of it, compared to most people.
Whenever you look back on it.
I used to come back from school or back from holidays and ride back at school, and the teacher sometimes we didn't get back in time for school, and I remember the Master Michael Home lifting me up in the class, and saying he's back from Italy, boys, and everybody home cheering, because we were away for like 7-8 weeks.
The whole summer, like, I was out there. Fantastic.
No, we didn't know at the time how lucky we were,
Mum has she's got 2 sisters left, living Bianca and Paola. And Paola's the youngest, but she's never off Facebook. she's like a young
81 or something.
The hair like Dino, like Paola Cardarelli, and she's always on Facebook, and just like a new woman, like,
Fantastic.
But
it's a lot easier too now with the language. You can
Yeah, of
on
course,
your
yeah.
phones
You
now.
got a
Like, you can
translator
do-
on your phone, you know.
You know?
Just,
Yeah.
but
And we-
it is easy to learn that language, you know. It is easy
Yeah.
because I was good at Latin at school, you know.
Latin helped a wee bit.
I always thought, well, this language no good to me. Latin,
Alright.
written Hark and God rest and Brenton taught me Latin, you know. But
But the Italian people are very family oriented anyway, so you
Oh,
had
oh,
that
aye.
courage.
Oh, aye.
Serious?
well, that whole Bassiano is just so family orientated, you know. And the wee men there's all playing a card game called Scoba. We tables playing cards. They don't do nothing all day. They're all retired, you know. But they
So laid back.
just lay. There's nothing to do in Bassiano. There's really is. It's not touristy. There's Old Town and there's kind of New Town. But we go to Rome for a day or go to Latina shop in the nearest city. But
They do like a festival. They do like a parade.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
aye.
Any
parades.
excuse for a parade.
They have a lot of
one.
religious parades
Aye.
right through the summer, you know, that
Aye.
carry statues through the town of
Oh.
different saints and different
Aye.
people with
Yeah.
cures, and you know, it's just the whole village seem to come together for these events, and they're just fascinating to watch them, you know.
But not long after, I think it was the year after Mum passed away, we were over and we went to the local chapel, and when we came out, up on the lamppost there was a little memorial photograph of Mum. It looked like a wanted poster, you know, but it was like
That's right.
rest in peace, you know, if
What's
you're
that
Nancy
like?
Carteret.
Not a lovely
Aye,
tribute. Wasn't that a lovely
Oh,
thing
aye.
to do? Yeah.
nice touch, you know.
Hey, the local mayor's got, he's got our, any of those articles that the Herald did, you know.
Yeah.
Nigel McDonough did a really good article one time, and it was like a big
That's
middle
right,
page of the
yeah.
Herald. We walked into the mayor's office one day, he invited us in, and we did a sort of a exchange. We got stuff from the Omagh District Council.
Oh, right, yes.
So we give it to him, and then he gave us something back, whatever. But he had the thing framed in the mayor's office, you know.
There you
He
are.
showed us, look, there's your mother up there, you know.
Fantastic.
Lovely.
So the book's coming out from Roma to Omagh. I got the title, but
Very good.
he's doing the book.
Eugene Floyd did a.
He didn't know.
He spent a lot of time recording or on
DVD,
video.
yeah.
But I remember going up to the house. He'd been up a few times, you know, and then he'd stopped coming for a while. He was probably busy doing whatever he was doing. But I remember calling into the house this afternoon, and she was sitting there wearing this lovely sort of a Hawaiian floral type shirt, you know. I says, "What are you all dressed up for?" Oh, she says, "Eugene Floyd's coming out here. He's going to interview me today, and he told me to keep this on for continuity."
Oh yeah.
Oh, sure, Jerry Anderson, she phoned Jerry Anderson
Did.
one time.
Oh, yeah.
I heard that.
Live.
Right. Yeah.
She
He was
did-
very taken back.
Live on the air.
So she is talking
heard
away
the
to
accent,
Jerry
yeah?
on the phone, and Jerry was talking back, and this is all going out live, you see, and some of the neighbours come down. He says, "Oh, you were great on the radio." She says, "What are you talking about, great on the radio?" She says, "I'm only after listening to you in conversation with Jerry Anderson." She says, "I was on the phone to him." She says, "Well, you went out on the air as well." You know.
She didn't realise that she was actually on the radio.
Gosh.
But
live.
I was sitting out, and me and another guy were road service boys. Were sitting and listening to the radio, and it came on. I says, "That sounds more like my mother on the radio." That was her. But Anderson was taken by her
He
because
was taken by her.
once she started explaining to him about, as you said earlier on, she went to Derry.
Yes.
And he had this connection with her, you know. And I remember he did say to her, "We'll have to get that woman back on again," you know. But she would have phoned him up right and regular to do birthday requests and stuff like that, you know. And then he started to
Oh,
realise
God,
that he remembered the accent, you know.
Yes. It was very distinct right now.
She never lost it after. She never had. She always had that.
And then
accent, like.
in her later years, whenever she sort of developed dementia, she was in Elton Hospital after breaking her hip, you know, and whatever way it affected her, the dementia, you know, she went back to her roots, and she, for a long, long period of time, she spoke nothing but Italian. She refused, well, I wouldn't say refused, she just didn't speak any English. So whenever they wanted to give her medication and things in the hospital ward, they used to have to send for an Italian nurse to come up and communicate with her, you know, because she just was
Shut down.
back in her youth again, you know.
I have a video of her down in Eltley Geldon, you know, and just talking. Mum say a few words, blah blah blah, and she just drifted into Italian. I go, "No, parli inglese, mama." Drifted into a wee bit of English and back into Italian again. I couldn't get her to, you know. What I think maybe the dementia was settling in at that stage, you know. But oh God,
Her and Mrs. Keys were great dart throwers, and she used to count whenever it was her turn to keep the score.
Keys and-
Whenever it was her turn to keep the score, she always kept. She'd be counting it in Italian.
Oh.
And the young fellas that were sitting there waiting for this were going, what's she saying? Like, you know, that was just her way of counting, like, you know.
And she wasn't very tall, you know, but that's why she always went for the 19. She never went near treble
Double
20.
top.
She was doing here the 19s all the time. Good treble 19.
Couldn't
treble
reach the
19.
20s.
You know, but every weekend when the community centre was up and running, every weekend they came back, there was a bowling trophy or a darts trophy. It was just unreal. The house was
She's
full.
very sporty. I suppose with her being, she was sporty, my dad was sporty, he played football, and but subconsciously, music-wise, she would have went into McSorley's records, the bicycle shop, and bought stuff. So the whole time my father was listening to big band stuff, or maybe Jim Reeves or whatever, or Nat King Cole, and she had on some of those Italian operatic singers like Mario Lanza, people like that. So we were so you had the Beatles and the stuff like this, and then you had the operatic stuff. So subconsciously we were listening to it, not knowing,
Sucking it all in.
taking it all in, you know. But then years later we developed our own sort of. I like my kind of music, and P liked his kind of music, and Tony liked his. He was the punk rock. But after a while, whenever we were upstairs playing the music, she got to the point where, without knowing or without thinking about it, she knew which one of us was up the stairs by what music was being played, you know. And coming down for dinner, she'd get the brush shaft and bounce it off the ceiling, you know. But she used to know who was in and who was out simply by what music we were playing, like, you know.
Did she sing herself?
Oh, she did sing. She
She
loved
used
music.
to sing away these always Italian songs about the house, you know, and
the usual O Sole Mio and Arrivederci Roma and all that kind of stuff, you know. But my dad was more. It was like getting blood out of a stone sometimes from him, wasn't it? You know,
well,
He was in the choir.
he would have been in Brother Hamill's choirs during the Face years way back in 1939, 1944, and that's probably what got him into music. You know, Hamill wouldn't have been the most popular man in town for several reasons, but he did instill music in a lot of young fellas. You know, and when I look at pictures of him in the choir from 1944-45, I can pick out all the faces that then went on to become members of St Eugene's band, you know. So obviously they were taught the rudiments of music through voice first of all, and then they went in to develop an interest in instruments. Like my father's uncle Tommy played every woodwind instrument in the band, and he played in the Skin and Fusilier band. His uncle Michael Fisher, he was a saxophone player for Aggie Rooney's dance orchestra about town, and they would have played the music in the pit for all the silent movies and the cinemas about Omagh, you know. So that possibly was an influence, and then he was quite friendly with Jimmy O'Neill, and that was another thing that would have drawn him into the band, you know. And before you knew it, he was in the band, and within a couple of years he was assistant secretary and then secretary of the band, and he in turn brought quite a few new members into the band in the mid-50s, you know, and so the story goes on to the present day, you know.
Where you're playing.
But I was interviewing myself an old man from about town, Jackie McCann, who was a band member as well, you know, and assisted Jackie. I says, what got you into St Eugene's band? He says, it was your father. He says, I was serving my time with him and McGartland Brothers, and he says, your father says to me, are you not interested in this carpentry at all? And he says, no. He says, I'm not. He says, well, why don't you come up to St Eugene's band and listen to a bit of music? And he says, whenever I listened to St Eugene's band, he says, it was just like my whole life changed that day. It was like a candle was lit. He says, and the sound of that band just changed my life. And he says, from that day on, he says, I picked up the trumpet. My brother Mickey, he says, got the clarinet and the tune, played with St Eugene's band, and then progressed on to the various show bands and groups that they played in, you know.
But you were the first to bring a guitar home.
Yeah, because
was it Brother Clavies?
I was taught at the primary school, at the Holy Family Primary School, by a Christian brother. But it was after school, you know, the lessons were up between maybe 3:30 and 4:15 on a Monday. But the soul, and I actually bought the guitar up above McGrade's chemist. There was a record shop.
That's
there
right,
was
aye. That's where I bought my
Thomas, when you
first.
worked
I
there.
think we Echo guitar, you know.
Oh,
I think you still have it in the house.
I still have
You
the guitar.
so that was
Aye.
I was the first to play the guitar, and then Dino
And I
introduced
got
the
up to it,
guitar,
and then
and
you
then
got into
Tony. Now he's multi-instrumentalist, you know. but,
So whoever got home from school first got to go on the guitar. And that used to be the old battle. You've had it long enough.
Well, it's great memories up in Culmore, even like, you know, Friday night listening to the Radio Luxembourg and Tommy Vance, like, you know, all that. And what did you say? Tony introduced punk rock to Omagh, which was brilliant, you know. We were the first kind of rock band, me and Mickey and Connor and Casper. Dino was the blues musician in the band, like, and in the house, like, you know. But when this rock was developing, like, you know, along came brother Tony here and rebel, like, you know. But like it was great that.
Well, I was a big Gilbert O'Sullivan fan, you see,
Yeah,
and I used to sit at the piano playing all these things, like, you know, no matter how I try, and I load again naturally, and it was going along with the flow, and I was always looking for something different. But myself and Terry Kelly, who's long past us now, he was into Deep Purple, Black Sabbath and all, and I just couldn't have it at all, you know. But one night, for some reason or other, we were sitting listening to John Peel, and he played Anarchy in the UK, you know, and that just changed everything. I don't know why, it just sort of flicked the switch, and
Some of that.
the next day
That was it.
we had just sort of moved in a completely different direction, you know. And Super Q Disco were around town at the time, Joe Cummins and
Charlie
Big Charlie McChrystal.
McChrystal.
And they also they had bought into this sort of a club where you could get discount albums. And Joe contacted me one day and he says, I've got a couple of albums, he says, that came through in the club. He says, I bought them, but they might be yours, seen, I don't know. He says, you can take them with you. And one of them was the Ramones' first album, you know. So this was like even before the Pistols. It was like August 76. So I came home this album and put it on, and I just thought, God, this is unbelievable. They're only playing 3 chords here. Anybody can do this. So I sort of convinced Terry, who was absolutely not an idea about playing an instrument. He could listen to music and he could tell you anything about music, but could he play? He couldn't play nothing. So I got him a bass guitar, and on the fretboard I put all these stickers and I listed all the notes, you know, from G right up to D. And I says, Terry, all you've got to do is play one string, forget about the other 3, and just slide up and down
The
from
E
G
string.
to C to D and back again. And I said, you've got a song. So the two of us sat down and we wrote 3 songs: Picking Spots, Mental Home and Hippies. And that was the 3 songs that got us our first gig in the CKS Community Centre, you know.
As a punk band. So
Yeah. And we had no drummer. But we were on our way home from the town one day and we spotted Gene Turbot standing outside the coach inn. And I says to Terry, I said, I will talk to Gene and see if he's interested.
Talent spotter,
And it just happened, it was a pure coincidence that he was about to buy a drum kit, believe it or not.
wow.
So he went to Bap O'Reilly's house in Brookmount, and up in his attic room he had a drum kit for sale for £100. Gene was working in Nestles then and he was making money, so he says, I'll take it. So the 3 of us carried this drum kit home, you know, bass, drums, snares, a lot. And we says to Gene, now practice away as best you can, and as soon as you're ready we'll go with, you know. But in between times, Sean O'Neill, who was on the committee at the CKS Community Centre, says, we want you in to play your first gig in the CKS. And we said, no problem, we'll do it. So we went running over to Gene and says, Gene, we've got our first gig. And he says, well, I'll not be playing, he says, because I'm not ready. So myself and Terry played those couple of songs and a few others, and that started then, that spiraled and went out of control, because all the young cubs that watched this, including this big boy here, they all were mesmerised, because they thought, well, there's no magic to playing music, you know, we just have to get out there and learn a few chords. And before you knew it, everybody in town was on hire purchase to the D&S Sound Centre. carrying guitars and amplifiers and drum kits, and everybody wanted to be in a band then, you know.
There's some great names.
And
There's
because
some
the thing
great
was,
names.
we were the only rock band, but then when Control Zone formed, all of a sudden there was about 12, there could have been a dozen little smaller bands, but they're all into the punk rock, you know. So it was great, you know. But
So who else was there? Control Zone and who was Straight Jacket?
Well, before
Don't
Control
let
Zone, myself and Terry were Straight Jacket, then there was
Aye.
Control Zone, but then there was Abstract Contingent. They were from the Hospital Road, and back in those days, there was a sort of a divide between this side of town and the Hospital Road, you know what I mean? So you couldn't go out the Hospital Road, but this fella, William Armstrong, ran a supermarket in Campsie along with his parents, and upstairs he opened a record shop. So believe it or not, we were writing letters to each other from one side of town to another, and he would say, why don't you come down to Campsie someday to my record shop? And I'd say, oh, that's totally out of bounds for me, William, you know. And that's how I got to know William, and he had a band called Abstract Contingent, and we invited them plus any other band around town to come to town hall, and we had a sort of a whole day of music. There was the Icons, Abstract Contingent, Control Zone. Who else was there back in those days?
In the town hall, down
There was a multitude of bands
I know.
playing.
The fact that you mentioned the
all
town hall,
young,
like,
young
It was
guys,
like
you
a
know.
punk festival, you know what I mean?
Yeah. All doing covers or original stuff for next year.
Quite a lot of it was original stuff, you know, and there was covers thrown in, obviously, you know.
But there was always every summer the trailer was pulled up into O'Kane Park or
There's
Stroll Park.
the street
You
festival.
know,
Street
and
festivals.
the bands got their shine, you know. Let's go for it, and the young ones all sit at the edge of the trailer. And,
Health and
everybody
safety
was
in those
heroes,
days.
like, you know. It was the buzz was unreal.
Like, we were lucky in a sense in that the BBC then picked up on us, and we got a bit of a break playing soundtracks for a series of programmes back in 1980, and we recorded those in the studio in Belfast, and as a result of that then we got an offer to record tracks for a compilation album with a label in London, but unknown to us they were a pretty right-wing label, and it was fanatical skinhead following had latched on to Control Zone, you know, and the album has since been bootlegged all over Germany and Poland and places like that, and it's selling like for about 25 quid a time, you know, and like we're, believe it or not, getting nothing out of it, you know.
What do you call the TV programme you were in?
About you.
About you?
Martin Lynch wrote a script for a
yes.
6-week series on youth culture back then, and
Well, Jackie Hamilton worked with the BBC.
It would have been at that time. Yeah.
well, I'll tell you a story about Jackie in a second, but I done the 6 weeks 6-week series, which were filmed in the Balmoral studio between December 80 and April 81, and whenever the programmes were all aired anyway, that was it. I was finished with television and I settled into my fluffy slippers and pyjamas, you know, and 2 BBC producers arrived at the house one day, Clive Sloan and Barry Powell, and the both of them asked me would I be interested in fronting a new series that they were doing along with a girl called Gloria Honeyford's daughter,
Karen
Keating.
Yeah, right, okay.
And they said basically you'd be introducing music and topical features around the country, and I shot them down. I said, look, I'm not interested, you know. And the 2 men said, well, can you suggest anyone that may be interested? And I said, well, I know a friend of mine called Jackie Hamilton, who plays the Moondogs, and he's mad keen about television and wants to get into TV work. So the 2 boys head off from Omagh to Derry, met Jackie, and on the way home late that night they went off the Glen Shane Pass and were both killed outright on the road, and it was a big shock. And believe it or not, Jackie did go on, and somebody else must have picked it up, you know. But he went on to front that programme anyway, you know.
Dear God.
But in the back of that man's car was a copy of the album that we had done, which I had loaned him. And as you can imagine, haven't seen since, you know.
Jackie Hamilton, he ended up in the production side then.
Aye.
Yeah. I had other fond memories, like going back to Gortrush again and rewinding again. But Dad was a goalkeeper. Was it almost Celtic or something? Was it
Kevlin United and St Joseph's.
But we went down to the army camp, you know, we're over what they call the swinging bridge, you know. And I was only like 7, and you know, and he was the goalkeeper, and but we were on the bridge, and they all had this rhythm, you know, and I just couldn't get it. I was nearly thrown into the river.
You had a walking step.
Yeah, they had walk in unison, whatever, and choreography. But I remember, I think one of the last games my dad played, and he was taken out during the match by big Norman Loughlin, big
sliding tackle.
Yeah, big red. I just busted my dad's knee, and that was his career over. Like, you know, I always remember that, you know, at the time. There wasn't very many watching the game, but Dad was just.
He told you nothing. Like he kept everything to himself. He signed to Derry City Reserves in 1953 for £1, you know. And we knew nothing about it until I think it was you seen it in the Herald one day. It was 50 years ago today, you know, the wee column that they did.
Feature,
Tony McGartland and Dan McCaffrey signed for Derry City Reserves. And I says to my dad, I says, what's all this about you and Derry City? What about it? He says, you only stayed for about 6 months.
He had to cycle up and down, you see, and he couldn't. I think he says, I couldn't be bothered cycling up and down the Derry. He says,
It was unbelievable. But he'd tell you nothing, like, you know.
We were just maybe naive. We never thought of asking him either. Like, you know we.
But it was only recently too. You took him out for a drive one day. I went up to Edenderry. He says we lived in that.
He lived in the railway crossing in Edenderry. His father had a job there in the gate crossing.
Gate crossing, yeah.
And he always told this story, you know, about when the train come through. He says the odd time would hit a rabbit, and he says the rabbit would land on the kitchen table, and his mother would grab it and say, "There's tonight's dinner."
No, but we only found that out later on.
Yeah.
But my mother could. We know a while lot about her side of the family, you know, but you've really dug down deep into.
Well, you see, my father on my father's side, his mother married 3 times, and they were all railway men. I don't know what it is about railway men, but anyway, the first man she married was a fella, Charles McGartland. And my father always said, he was no relation of ours, but I discovered later through genealogy and searching that they were related, and that it was a thing in those days that if a family member died, another family member would have stepped in and taken over from there, you know. But anyway, Charlie died as a young man of TB. He worked in the Glasgow and Caledonian Railway in Scotland, where they lived, you see. So him and my grandmother were there. Poor old Charlie Tuckgallen died young, 43 years of age. So and he had a couple of children. And she remarried over there to a man, Bernard Casey, and he also was a railway man working on the same railway company, probably Charlie's best friend, you know. And he had a son, Bernard Jr., and before he was actually born, Bernard Sr. was at war in France, 1914, and in 1915 was killed, and his wife got a telegram to say your husband's been killed in his line of duty. So she came home with all these children, and whenever she arrived back on Bridge Street where her father lived, he says, "Where are you going with all them wains? There's no room for them here." So she put a couple of them out with an aunt in Killyclogher, and the rest of them she kept nearby. And then whenever she married our own grandfather, Paddy McGartland, you had then 2 McGartland men in the equation, you know. Yeah. And my father used to say, "How come he's called Bernard Casey and he's my brother? And that other boy there's McGartland, and you say he's nothing to me?" And we're all living in the same house, you know. So it was a bit of a confusing story, you know.
Well, is McGartland an Omagh name? Is it an Omagh family? Tony, is it?
My father always believed that it was a Scottish name, but I think it was because his mother had spent so much of her early years in Scotland that he assumed they were Scottish. But when I go back through time, the records of the McGartlands in Tyrone go back to Erie Kilcairn country, you know. Knockconny, I think the townland is. So there were those folk were there, and they possibly came to Omagh. I'm not sure. There's no records
Is there a
going
coat
any
of
further.
arms even with McGartland?
Oh, there is,
Is
there?
there?
But my great grandfather had a butcher shop at the corner of the Coach Inn there way back in the 1920s, and his brother was on the census records was known as a flesher. So I take it that was something similar to a butcher back in those days, you know.
Yeah.
A flasher or flesher?
Flesher.
And they were all railway workers.
Oh, yeah, all railway men.
Uncle who lived there. Great uncle.
You see, anybody that lived in the Dromore Road or Railway Terrace, Railway View or the Hill tended always to come from a railway background, you know, or worked near there, you know. Fascinating stuff.
Oh, it is.
I joined the society, the Irish Railway Record Society, and I got friendly with one of the fellas who works in the archive. And what I used to do, I was just to fire him down questions, and he would send me back all the names of these railway men, but it saved me the bother.
Take it back, Tony. What year did you move to Café Park?
It was about
71.
70 or
Oh,
71.
Culmore.
Culmore.
70 or 71.
But we spent a lot of time in O'Kane, like
I remember telling Brother McKenna in the primary school that I was moving to Culmore Park, and they changed my address, you know. And he says, "Oh, you're going to have to go to Culmore School now," he says. And I remember going home and telling my dad, Brother McKenna says I'm going to have to go to Culmore School. He says, tell me cash himself on, you know.
No, when my mother told us we were going to Culmore, I started crying. I said, I'm not going away out there, it's in the middle of nowhere. I didn't want to go.
It was called Dodge City back then, you see.
No, I said, I'm not going out there. There's no way, sure, don't know anybody. And like, Culmore's closer to the town now than McGartlands is, like, you know.
Like, we were going to piano lessons, myself and Dino, back in 1967, 1968. And we used to walk the derelict railway track to get to O'Kane Park, and we were there with Phyllis Chesters, who would have been a family relative, and you know, we would have had our piano lesson, played about a wee bit of football about the park, and then walked all the way back to Gortrush Park again, you know. And went through this phase where there was all this talk about the mystery man, and then we would have to get off the track and get back on the roads again, you know.
Because we used to go to the cinema on the Drumquin Road, and then in the summers it was like the fog and the mist was floating about, but we were living in maybe going up the railway track, and there was could be a gang of us, heading home by like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and you'd be thinking, is that somebody up in front of us? They just somebody spooked somebody else, and then their mind started playing tricks, like, and then we all just bolted, back to we were going back to Culmore actually, but we just walked the road like the railway children again, like, we're just or Stand By Me, that film, we just bolted up the road.
But that I wonder how we first moved out to O'Kane, like. It was a real eye opener. Like, you had some of the boys about there were like, there was one fella in particular, we'd be kicking football. And I think Izzy Muldoon might have been on here recently, I don't know. But Izzy was a great footballer, and she would have played football with the boys, like, But you'd be playing football, and there was one certain fella used to have a hatchet with him. And now he was literally a hatchet man, like. Anybody came anywhere near him would get the ball off him, he'd just wave the hatchet like this here. Or else somebody else would be at the front door with a slingshot, taking shots at you when you were coming around the grass. That was unreal.
They called it Dodge City, but it was like something out of a western in a way, There was boys going down the hills on the bonnets that they'd broken off cars and things, or
for a slide, you'd be getting up and down Culmore Hill there in the winter time.
You were in the country, really.
Learning how to make kites and flying these huge big kites,
Like, because Sperrin Park up behind us in Culmore, that was our playing field. Like, the cornfields were just big, huge. And like, it would come in the snow time. Yeah, we had a plastic bag, like the big turf bag. Get on down the hill. No fear, just down.
I remember us going into this place called the Plantation, which was at the back of the new road before it was built. It was this big sort of a hollow gorge, and we used to build Easter huts, and then we used to build traps to prevent all the fellas from different estates attacking them, So what we done was we would dig a hole, about 4 foot deep,
bear trap.
And then we would put all these bamboos pointing upwards.
Rambo.
As you do, like.
And then we would cut it over with twigs and loose grass.
You're watching too many movies.
So if you fell in there, you know, you were in trouble. And if you got any of the Ardmore boys had a strayed over, you know, you'd have kept them prisoner most of the day. And you'd have twisted, you know,
tortured them.
wee bits of hay into their hair and plucked their hair.
That's right.
Or else put cigarette burns in them.
Aye.
You see, I learned the secret of how to smoke then too, you know. I remember going down the hill in one of these wooden trolleys that we made, myself and Brent McNabb, and we ran over a packet of cigarettes, and I said to Brent, what are you going to do with them? He says, me and you's going to smoke them. I says, what, smoke them? How are you going to do that? He says, I'll get matches. So tore a corner off a packet of matches and we went way up the fields and we lay up behind this tree and we smoked the whole packet of fags between us. And I come down and we thought we were drunk. And I remember having to go into Patsy Devlin's shop and buy an XL chewing gum to get the smell of smoke before I went home, you know. And you only thought you were kidding your parents back then, you know, but they probably knew
You're right,
the smell of smoke off you, you know.
Oh, your clothes.
Patsy, Patsy used, whenever you returned the lemonade bottle, you get 10p back.
That's right.
I used to save up for albums, you know.
Uh-huh.
As you mentioned earlier on there about the shop above McGartlands, that's where I bought my first album, but it was due to the fact that I was saving up lemonade bottles. But Patsy got cute after a while, because he would say to you, where did you get that bottle there? And like, you know what, yeah, I says I got it on here. So what he did was, he used to stamp. He'd put his own stamp on the bottle, so whenever you brought it back, he'd look at the label to make sure that his stamp was on, to stop you from sort of ripping him off. But that's how we got, that was, above McGartlands was where I got my first
But the
record.
CKS would have been the first community centre in town, you know,
Oh, yeah.
O'Kane and Shannon Park. But I always remember, like, the Sunday nights, like DJ Joe Cummins, with Joe.
The place was
Place was
stuffed.
rammed.
It was
The whole
on a
town
Sunday.
came to it.
You know, it was amazing.
That was the
you know.
opening for the punk. They give you the opening too for the
Aye,
punk rockers. Like.
We were running around with these t-shirts that we made out of black bin liners and things, you know, and the whole town were coming out. It was like a come out to see the circus.
New fashion.
Just new fashion, you know.
Hey, Joe Hull, God rest him, Joe Hull used to make, whenever we were kicking football, somebody turned up one day with a white t-shirt with a Man United crest on it. Where'd you get that? Joe Hull.
And Joe Hull used
Joe
to
was
do
great
them.
man for his own. Like. The next thing, everybody was up at Joe's door knocking.
50p a shirt.
White t-shirt and Everton logo or United or Leeds.
He done them all in Indian ink and then they couldn't wash out, you see.
Joe was making a wee 50p a skate at the time, like, for doing the logos, like.
But when we were chatting about mum making lasagnas and then giving them to different people in the parishes and whatever, but Dad, he spent a lot of hours in the garage, you know, he was making little
Birdhouses.
white cottages with green
Cottages.
roofs, you know,
Yeah.
little way back, and he would just give them to people. He would never say he could have sold them, but that was just a bit of crack for him, you know. But I had my white van at the time. He said, "Come on, let's go out to Woodlop and get some timber," you know. And Dad knew the duddies and all this crack. He said, "Right, reverse the van away down the back there," you know, and out of the camera view, you know. And go down and put on maybe 2 sheets of 8x4, you know, and some nails. But there was 6 planks of 8x4 sheets in the back of the van. Dad says, "Going up now, up to the front now and wait for me outside." And my dad would go in there and pay for 2 sheets of 8x4 and like all the screws, that's all, like they're all in the, Dad, you can't keep doing that. "Oh, yeah, them boys know me, that's alright. Drive on home, you know." But I just spent hours and hours in the garage just making these little
Making stuff.
just giving to people, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, just that was just
Would he make them and then plaster them or what? Or
no, he just painted them white, like white paint, like green roof. You
You
know,
still
and a
see
wee-
them
wee
about
chimney.
today. Some people have them there.
And
man.
people have them in their, and we all got one for our gardens, you know, like, you know. But
He's another man for making cots too for new weans, you know.
right?
Wee wooden cots and for newborns.
Yeah.
Where did he serve his time? Do you remember, Tony? Do you know?
He served his time with McKinney Trillers down the Derry Road. They were
John
coach
McKinney?
building and that, you know, and he told me a story of when he was not long there, him and Jackie McCausland, the painter, were working together, you know, and he says that John McKinney also done a bit of undertaking on the side, and he had a big garage and the hearse was reversed into the garage, you see, and McKinney was going to Belfast for supplies one day, and he says to my dad and Jackie, he says, "The two of you boys, I want to see that shed cleared out before the day's out, you know." So Jackie realised after John had long gone that the only way to clean the shed out was to get the undertaker's van or car out, you see. So he says to my dad, he says, get you into the back of him. He says, and I'll take you a wee run round the day road, you see. So my dad got into the back of the hearse and lay down. Jackie, he drove the hearse out of McKinney's driveway, he says, and they dumped it up through the town with him and round St Anne Avenue past his house, he says, and he was terrified because of his mother had been standing at the front of St Anne Avenue and seen him lying in the back of the hearse and there'd been trouble, you know.
He told a story one time about whenever he was on the building site. Brian Call was only a young fella, he might have been only 14 or 15, learned to do his trade, whatever. But he says, young Call climbed up the ladder, he says, me and Jerry McCann were on the roof, and he says, Jerry just went, he seen Brian Call come up the ladder, and he just basically kicked the ladder away from the roof, you know, and shouted, Geronimo. I says, what? He says, what a crack, you know. So anyway, years later I met Brian Call, and I said to Brian, do you remember whenever you were a young fella, and told him a story? He says, I do, surely. He says, I remember it well. He says, but he says, the thing was, he says, my father, whenever I was falling off the ladder, he says, I wasn't worried about breaking my neck or breaking my leg. He says, his father had given, you know, these wooden rulers that open up,
The folding carpenter's rule.
Yeah.
aye, he says, my father had given me one of them, and he said, I had it down the leg of the overalls like that. He says, all I was worried about was if it breaks the ruler, like, you know, my dad go mad.
Never
Brian,
mind the neck.
Brian, I'd never mind your neck or your leg. He was worried about the ruler being broke.
Then later years he worked with McGartland Brothers. You say?
He worked with Ray McCann and them and Jerry McCann. They would have had quite a bit of work on the building of the married quarters and the camp and that, you know, as
right.
most of the contractors about
Yes,
town at the
those,
time did, you know.
That's right. They would have built the old Strull house.
That's right, they
Aye,
built Stood
that's
House,
right,
they built
The
Omagh
health
College,
the health centre too.
the health centre, they done Dungannon Tech as well, Dungannon Hospital. A lot of crown buildings and things around
Yes.
different
Big
towns.
jobs.
But he'd been and then that spell that he spent in England working at the power station in Derby, you know, so he was
Good with his hands on him.
he's a good carpenter about town, you know.
Yeah. Well, to go back to music, can you remember getting the first record player or?
Oh, aye, we had a
We got a dance set.
we had a wee dance set major
Like everybody
in the
else.
front room, you know, and I remember my dad was topping her up all these 45s, you know, and the record would play and the next one would drop. And
Next one.
the only thing that I couldn't figure out was he used to play non-stop was Come Down the Mountain, Katie Daly on a Sunday, you know, and this went on and on, and I used to think, you know, has he any other records on his collection? But that was the first
We had no choice. Have you got
There
any
was
of this?
loads of
We just
records of
listen to whatever it played.
whatever.
You know?
There was loads of
Yeah.
records about in the house. Like,
Oh,
everything
the
from
attic was full of 78s.
Marl, that's
the 78s, we sort of took a notion one
We used to
Friday
fire them
night.
about like they were
They,
frisbees.
my mum and dad went to the community centre and we took a notion. They opened up this big, they were in a big divan thing,
Aye.
and they had the brown paper thing on.
sleeve and all
The
that.
three of us started flying them about, started using them as frisbees around the living room, thinking this was great crack. Sure, God knows, we don't even know what they were. Columbia records, I remember they were.
But the
Columbia.
funny thing about the dance set major was the dance set was back in the day was probably a way ahead of its time, you know. But then as the hi-fi came in and the stereogram and all those other things, you know, you wouldn't have paid tuppence for a dance set major. But about 20 years ago, the dance set came back into fashion again, and people started to buy them, and then companies started to produce, you know, replacement parts to them and that. So I decided, when my father wasn't too well, I thought, you know, for one last chance, I would love him to hear some of his old records on a dance set major. So I went on eBay, and the dance set majors were all going for 450 quid, and I thought, holy Moses, that's unbelievable money. But I kept watching and waiting, and one day I struck luck and I bought one for 275 quid. And so I got a wee pair of, a set of 4 legs for it that screwed in underneath, and it was immaculate. It was all rewired and like new. Set it up in the front room, and then I went off and I bought Come Down the Mountain, Katie Daly. and a few other of the old favourites that he liked.
Was Wandering Star in it? No.
I Wandering Star.
Lee
Two
Martin.
little boys.
So
Ralph
that was okay. So I decided I would get him over one Sunday for his dinner, you see. So it was actually my birthday. So I said, will you come over to the house for dinner and we'll listen to the band? I had no trouble at all. So over he came, you see, and I says, come on here to the music room. Brought him in, and he come over and he looked at the dance set in the corner, you see, and he says, our old record player from Gortrush, he says. And I says, no, says, I am afraid not. I says, that thing there's my own, and it cost a hell of a lot of money, you know.
Yeah.
And I played him Come Down the Mountain, Katy Daly and all the crack, and he sat and he was singing along and all, you know.
Or you thought you were up in the attic?
And he died only weeks after that, you know what I mean? So it was great to do it, like.
You know that we had that record. Dermot O'Brien and his clubmen doing Come Mountain Katy Daly.
Yeah.
No, there's...
Yeah, listen days.
Did we not have a Decca? Was it not with a record player called DECCA?
Decca were a big name on record.
They were a
I
good
thought
one.
Decca was the one we had, and
No, it wasn't
Gortrush.
that set.
No, damn.
Decca went in their label, your record
Decca,
label.
oh, maybe
The
it was
record
Decca.
label was
Decca
Decca.
were-
Oh yeah.
But then,
Sorry.
can you remember then the first stereo? I mean, the dance set wasn't stereo; it was mono. Wasn't
Oh,
it?
it was just a single speaker at the front.
I think
I
a stereo
was a
thing.
big
You opened up.
radiogram.
Aye, but was it not one of those ones where you opened up the lid and the lid split in half, and that acted as the two speakers?
Aye, there was that. Then there was another
long
one with a glass top on it.
Yeah.
Or the smoke
Aye.
glass.
I smoked glass.
It
It
had the
had
record player.
it had a radio.
Radio.
I tell you, that was an expensive item in those days.
Because I can remember
a radio
yeah,
would have
The
been.
radio going off, and what happened was the cord that connected the dial to the channels
Yeah.
had slipped,
Right.
and we couldn't get our tune that it was whistling about, and we were trying to get Luxembourg coming in and that. you know.
That's what we were listening to, Tommy Bass and Radio Luxembourg.
Aye,
with the big long one, but it was
Oh.
multifunctional. It had the
Aye.
record player, a radio.
You listen, we
Maybe
listened
a
to a lot of
tape,
radio
maybe a
now.
cassette.
You had to
Aye.
find, like, it's everything else you had between the radio
See,
and then
though,
top of the
there
pop.
wasn't much money about our house, you know what I mean?
There wasn't much money anywhere.
Aye,
Really. Nobody
You
had
know,
anything,
buying, my mother used to buy everything out of Freeman's catalogue, you know, and like we used to sort of sit around leading up to Christmas, and she'd say, right, point out what you want Santa to bring you. And us, very naively, you know, I always went for typewriters because I was mental about typewriters, you know. And every Christmas morning it was like magic, you know. But I remember my mother telling me, you know, she says, when I was about 10 or 11, she says, you know, this is all coming from me, this stuff, you know. Forget about Santa Claus from here on in, you know.
Yes.
And I thought, Christ almighty, if I had known that, I would have picked something less expensive, you know.
Oh, well, that's
Remember
the
the
magic.
I was fascinated with typewriters. You know, I just kept buying, you know, from the most basic to the most advanced typewriter. And it wasn't even electric ones then. Whenever electric typewriters started to show, I started buying electric typewriters. And
Did you learn to touch tape and all, Tony?
oh, I battered away. I used to dream that I was running a newspaper all at home, you know. I was writing reports of Match of the Day, and it was all in a fantasy that I wanted to be a journalist, you see.
But the Christmas thing, you remember?
I still haven't stopped writing.
No.
Nigel McDonough had a photograph in it one time of your boy that did Santa Claus down in Anderson's.
Oh, yeah.
Anderson's down there. Every Christmas was a big thing to go to Anderson's down at the bottom of the town
Burns.
there.
That's
Like,
right.
I
George
found out
Burns.
his name was George Burns.
Yeah.
I seen this photograph. Santa sitting there. It was a big deal because they had a wee train set and all of it around the shop and
Yeah,
everything.
right, yeah.
And I looked at the photograph and there was a queue of people. There was somebody sitting up on Santa's knee. There was a queue of people. And there was my mother at the back of the queue with her Sunday best type of thing on her. I texted Tony. I says, did you see the picture in the Herald today? I says, picture of Mum at the back of the queue, queuing up for George Burns or for Santa Claus. He says, aye, do you not recognise the boy sitting on Santa's knee? I says, who? He says, you.
And many's the gay night, from dark to daylight, I spent with people of high renown. But with all their splendour and heaps to spend, sure, my mind would wander back to Omagh Town.